immediately seizing central real estate. This move opens avenues for queenside development and prepares to contest the crucial d4 square. Establishing a pawn chain to contest the center, aiming for solid development. Developing a knight here prepares to contest the center and opens a diagonal for the queen. Developing a knight to its natural outpost solidifies the center's influence and prepares for further queenside maneuvering. Challenging the center now opens a fight for pawn superiority and dynamic counterplay. Solidifying the d5 pawn, this solidifies the center while preparing for the pawn chain to potentially advance. Immediately opening the c-file offers immediate dynamic play, but sacrifices central pawn presence for piece activity. Re-establishing pawn symmetry solidifies black's central structure, preparing for queenside development and contesting the open files that may soon emerge. Asserting central presence, nc3 prepares to expand white's influence while eyeing potential weaknesses in black's pawn structure. Developing the knight to c6 solidifies the pawn on d5 and prepares for active piece play, aiming to counter white's central ambitions. Developing the bishop to f4 openly challenges black's central pawn structure and prepares for immediate kingside expansion. Targeting the c3 knight directly, this queen sortie aims to disrupt white's harmonious development and potentially create early attacking chances. Solidifying the center and preparing development, this move calmly asserts control. Suddenly, black disrupts white's pawn structure and aims to occupy central squares with this knight's bold leap. Unveiling an immediate threat, this maneuver aims to disrupt black's queen and seize control of key diagonals. Solidifying the center and preparing to develop the bishop creates a robust pawn structure, though it momentarily hinders queenside activity. Developing the bishop to its most active diagonal prepares for castling, while eyeing black's central structure and potential weaknesses. Challenging the queen's placement, black pins a knight and seeks active piece play, aiming to disrupt white's coordination. Reinforcing the central control and preparing to dominate the c-file, white fortifies their presence. Sacrificing the knight opens crucial lines for attack against white's undeveloped kingside. Unlocking the c-file for rook activity and reinforcing the central pawn structure is a sound positional choice. Gaining a tempo and placing the bishop on a commanding diagonal, this maneuver forces white to address an immediate threat while offering exciting attacking prospects. Securing the rook to challenge black's exposed bishop and potentially control the b-file hints at an assertive queenside initiative. Securing the queenside and preparing to develop the light-squared bishop marks a patient, defensive consolidation for black's position. Initiating a bold central pawn push, white immediately challenges black's quiescent setup. Liberating the e-pawn injects immediate tactical dynamism, challenging white's central pawn structure and potentially opening lines for black's pieces. Targeting black's doubled pawns forces awkward choices, opening lines for active piece play. Developing the bishop to defend the pawn, and eye the queenside promises dynamic possibilities. Deploying the knight to d2 shores up the queen's protection while preparing for potential pawn advances on the kingside. Challenging the bishop's placement, this pawn thrust aims to disrupt white's coordination and potentially gain space on the queenside. Clearing the path for the rook's dominance on the c-file, this exchange sacrifices a bishop for pawn structure damage. Opening the kingside diagonal after a pawn capture forces a strategic decision about piece activity versus pawn structure. Aggressively challenging the knight's outpost creates a tactical knot, aiming to unravel black's centralized defense. Unleashing the queen to pressure the weakened queenside pawn structure, this move initiates a dynamic struggle for control of the center. Bolstering the bishop on d6 asserts control over key squares and prepares for an onslaught on the kingside. A bold gambit sacrificing material to disrupt white's pawn structure and open lines toward the king. Unleashing a knight fork, white forces black's queen to reposition, creating immediate tactical complications and a potential open file. Sacrificing the queen to shatter white's pawn structure and expose their king is a bold, desperate gamble for counterplay. Reclaiming the queen decisively neutralizes black's initiative and prepares a powerful central push. Sensing a tactical opportunity, black exchanges a bishop for a rook, aiming to simplify into a favorable endgame despite the material deficit. Reclaiming material, white simplifies into a favorable endgame with queens exchanged. A necessary step to untangle the king from this exposed position. Securing the queenside pawn majority while preparing to activate the rook and target vulnerable squares. Asserting control over the open file, this piece prepares to challenge white's queen and activate its other forces. Securing the queenside and preparing to contest the c-file, white aims to activate its remaining pieces. Reclaiming the open file after that rook exchange is crucial for future counterplay. Finally, the king seeks refuge, establishing a crucial defensive perimeter and preparing for a more aggressive endgame. Proposing a sortie for the rook, aiming to contest the open h-file and create a more active defense for its king. Securing the king's safety, this prophylactic pawn advance preempts potential backrank threats and begins to solidify white's pawn structure. Bishop's trade is complete. Now white seeks to activate the rook on the open file. A bold attempt to unlock attacking chances by seizing the open c-file, though it weakens the pawn structure significantly. Shaping the kingside's defensive structure, this pawn advance reinforces potential weaknesses while preparing to challenge white's dominant queenside pressure. The knight repositions, eyeing the f6 square and preparing to infiltrate black's camp. Unleashing the rook offers a glimmer of activity, but it leaves the king surprisingly exposed to potential checks along the open ranks. Striking at the misplaced king's protection with a decisive knight fork, this aims to dismantle black's defensive structure. Sacrificing the bishop for clear lines, black opens an escape route for their monarch from the encroaching queenside pressure. Opening the d-file now creates a dangerous path towards black's king, forcing a defensive posture. A strategic decision to reclaim material balance, though it opens avenues for white's rook and king. Suddenly, a sharp check forcing the king to dance, opening lines for the queenside assault.